I feel like cold opens, like they work when they work and they don't work when they don't work.
Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to FANTI, the podcast for all those complex and complicado conversations about the gray areas in our lives. I am really thrown off my game right now. Wow, I had like a whole thing I was going to do today, and that just completely took me out.
I'm Tre'vell Anderson.
Yeah, my name's Jarrett. I host around here. You're going to hold the microphone this whole time?
Yeah, I was saying that I'm trying something new and something different. We'll see, what it gives. Because, I usually like to talk with my hands. You can't really do that when one of the hands is obligated. For the people who are listening and not watching us, I am holding my microphone as opposed to having it on the stand this go around. We'll see how it works out.
I don't know why it's so funny to me. Like, it is pure comedy. I kind of want to join you, but I don't have the right microphone hooked up for that today.
Yeah.
But like, it's
all right.
It's so hilarious.
It's all right. While you recollect yourself, I will tell the people what we are going to get into today. We will be talking about Don Lemonisha. All right. He will be our FANTI topic today, the complex and complicado of it. But first, we have a very special, I don't know if we're calling this a pass the popcorn moment. Maybe it's just an announcement. Insert horns here.
No, it's a. I know Ann put on a split screen right there. Y'all love that. So here's the thing. We have been working on something. I don't know if you've really heard about it, but Tre'vell and I are authors and authoresses with books in store right now. We see each other available wherever you get your Slay-worthy books.
Amen.
And another book on the way, Historically Black Phrases, which will be available September 19th. We've been working on this book for about 2 years now. And
my God, today.
Having gotten it sold in late 2021, after about 5 years of trying to pitch it myself as a book, as a show, as a video series, as all kinds of different shit, we've got a bit of an exciting reveal for y'all right now here on the podcast. Y'all have been riding with us for this, and we can actually show you our cover today. And so for those of you on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. We'll be able to talk about it for those of you that are listening. But
yeah, it's either over here or over here. Maybe it's up there.
No, I think it's right there. I think it's full screen right now for y'all as we record. This is our cover, and I'm so excited about it. We have worked very hard on design and going back and forth with ideas. Tre'vell was very, very vocal about what they wanted in this process.
Wow.
To the point that was just really frustrating to work with. What?
Wow. You go ahead, rewrite history, honey. Go ahead.
Well, actually,
okay.
I think one of the interesting things about the book, the interior and the exterior, as we're looking at the cover, you can see the background is all the different phrases from inside the book, and so you kind of get a feel for what is inside the book. But Tre'vell, you haven't seen this. This is actually reminiscent of my first pitch deck back in 2017. And I gave the producers the image so you can see it. And it's very similar to it has the same kind of vibe, if you will. This was back when I was pitching it as the video series and all those other things. And so now we have the actual.
You think I'm surprised by this?
No, not at all. I didn't expect you to be to fall over. You're holding a microphone. I wasn't expecting anything. I don't know what's happening. But we have been.
Well, let me say this.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say this. Jarrett has been, y'all have heard the story of, how this book came to be from Jarrett probably a couple times at this point on the podcast. I will give you the abbreviated if you are just joining us now in the name of Jesus. Long story short, Jarrett was, doing Facebook messages defining various words that we as, Black folks use often in our discourse. And somebody said, oh, you should make this into a book. And Jarrett, for whatever reason, was like, oh, yeah, I should make this into a book. And so Jarrett, put something together, started pitching it as a book, as a TV show, as all of these other things. For whatever reason, it didn't work out. And then he had the best idea he has ever had, and that was to bring me onto the project because We all know that I have that little special razzle dazzle. Everything, just improves when I come into the mix.
And we are so grateful for
And
it.
then we were listen. You know what? It is very hard being me. Okay.
If this were Abbott Elementary, I would look to camera like, girl.
But the point is, we are revealing the cover to you all. As you see, the cover is very much Jarrett's aesthetic. You saw the initial pitch deck background, vision that he had. And so, Jarrett has been living with this book and this idea for a little minute. I have only been living with it for the last 2.5 years or so. And so what you see, we hope you will enjoy it. It is it's a coffee table book, but like one of the smaller coffee table book sizes. It's going to be very thick, highly designed. It's going to be a good time. Okay. Just know that. September 19th.
I did not expect you to tell the story. And like, I am realizing I've never heard you tell that story. But now I'm also recognizing how I tell that story all the time because you said all the things that I say every time. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, we're getting ready to go on press for the book in a couple of months. And we're going to be doing this.
Yeah, we gonna have to figure out another story, baby, because I'm tired of that one. I done heard that story too much.
Well, I also want to say, like, we when we were designing the interior of the book, I had all these ideas about what it would look like when it was my book, but when it became our book, I was like, well, I don't know what that book looks like. And we had design meetings, and Tre'vell was like, well, what do you mean you don't know what that book looks like, what the book looks like? And I was like, well, and I said all that. And you were like really kind of pushing back like I was being ridiculous. And I was like, what do you mean?
You were being ridiculous, because we all know. You can look at the frame. Look at Jarrett's frame and put up Jarrett full screen right here. Okay, look at that office. Okay, look at the pillows behind Jarrett. They are perfectly karate chopped in the middle.
Let me zoom out for y'all here.
See, you didn't even have to zoom out. You didn't have to do all that. And so we know that Jarrett just has a particular, idea and aesthetic. And, I was like, listen, let's lean into it. And so that's the book. It's available for pre-order right now. It comes out September 19th. We'll be doing, the tours and all that in the press and all that stuff coming. But we really just wanted to kind of give you all the little exclusive, if you will, of what you can expect come September 19th. So check it out, y'all.
Yes, you can pre-order the book at historicallyblackphrases.com. You can get it at an independent bookstore or wherever you get your book. So we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we are talking about Don Lemon. I'm actually a little bit anxious about this. I still don't know if we should.
You'll be all right.
But we're going to do it. That's next.
Trans representation in media is at an all-time high, with trans entertainers gracing the screens large and small.
But trans voices, especially Black trans voices, are rarely centered in our own stories.
That's why we bring you a new limited series called We See Each Other, the podcast, co-hosted by me, journalist and better half of the Max Fun podcast, FANTI, Tre'vell Anderson.
And me, award-winning journalist and media personality, Shar Jossell.
All of it is based on my book, We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film.
Now listen, folks, we're having a very different kind of conversation. It's giving kitchen table talk.
We get into the discourse, honey. Tune into We See Each Other, the podcast at MaximumFun.org or wherever you get Slayworthy audio. Welcome back, beautiful people. As you all know, Jarrett and I are journalists, okay? And we are also Black queer folks, okay? And for Black queer folks who are journalists, when it comes to the question of representation and who we can look at in the industry with similar identities, especially at the top, whatever you might consider to be the top of the industry, there's a very finite list of people that we can point to. One of the people on that list, in my estimation, whether you like it or not, is Don Lemon, the now former CNN anchor. Throughout his time on the cable news network, did you know that CNN stood for Cable News Network? Anyway, throughout his time on the cable news network, we've seen him transcend just being a news person to being more of a personality, a celebrity, dare I say, a possibility model for some. But a couple weeks ago, Don Lemon was unceremoniously fired, his words not mine, or his sentiment not mine, unceremoniously fired from the network 3 years before his contract was supposed to expire. According to the New York Times, CNN had experienced difficulty in booking guests willing to appear on air with Don, and polls had shown his popularity among viewers had declined. There was also a Variety expose in which they spoke to more than a dozen people who basically said that he was misogynistic, that he was horrible to work with, not great work environment. And if you're like me, I'm old enough to remember when he was covering, I believe it was Ferguson, talking about it, quote unquote, obviously smelling like weed. Or do you remember that time when he wanted to discuss nigga on his show and he had, the signs with the word on it? My God, today. Anyway, all the more
My God,
reason.
yesterday.
All the more reason why he is a perfect FANTI topic, because it is not only complex over here, it is also very complicado. All right. Jarrett, to get us started, how did you come to know who Don Lemon is? What is your origin story with Don Lemon?
Not my origin story. Oh God. Okay, so I mean, I've always been a news junkie, and so being on watching cable news all the time, I was very familiar with Don in his earlier days at CNN, and then I was an intern at CNN, so I worked in documentaries, and like I got the opportunity to meet with him because I think I'd asked or like made some kind of connectivity there. But like that was not my department, so I wasn't over there with him regularly, but I got to spend the day with him, really kind of like shadowing him and see what his process was, how he was writing, how he was meeting with his team. And also then the coolest part of it to me was like, as a person who wanted to be an anchor back then, he let me sit on the desk with him while he was live on the air. Right. And like,
Oh,
you couldn't see me on television, but I was sitting next to him, like, and like seeing him go through the scripts and watching him click through. And he was fantastic. And I was like,
oh.
it was so kind. Right. And I remember being like, oh my God, this is the coolest experience. And I had worked in news and different things like that. But like, but it was a very, very cool experience to be sitting there on the desk at CNN while we were on the air. And so he was really, really fantastic to me back then. And then like, I haven't really connected with him very much since then, to be quite honest. We follow each other. We are familiar at very best. But like that was my sense of who Don Lemon was from the earliest kind of experience with him. What about you? What's your Don Lemon origin story? Because I feel like it's going to be very different.
Well, I was not somebody who watched the news. You know what? I think I actually came to know about him like in adulthood, right? Like I think I had already graduated. Maybe I was in grad school. Maybe I was already working at the LA Times. I can't remember. But I do recall reading his book. Like reading his book was my first, I think it's called Transparent or something like that. Reading his book was like my first time like really knowing who he was. Like I knew he was on TV, but I wasn't really watching cable news. This was also early in my like journey of like diving into journalism, right, as a career for myself. And so I knew I was interested in that time at like queer people who were queer Black people who were doing this type of work. And so, you Google, Black gay journalists or whatever. And, I want to say it was a few years after his book had came out. So he was like near the top of the list. I got the book from, I believe, the library, maybe. You remember those?
I'm not familiar.
I got the book from the I got the book from the library and I read it. And so I probably know entirely too much about his, journey to the CNN anchor desk. But that was my first like diving into it as a potential like, person to look up to. And then obviously over the years, once I was actually in this career, actually doing the job, actually trying to carve out space for myself while also witnessing his work over the years. I mentioned some of those highlights in my intro. That is when I was like, oh, okay. Okay. But as we get into If you know, you know. Okay.
I'm not doing this with you. I'm not.
As we get into our fan and anti structure for this conversation, let's talk first about the things that we like, that we appreciate about Don Lemon, his place in the industry, etc. Take it away.
This will probably end up being the blooper, but I just have to point out something that has happened over here for me. You mentioned that the book might be titled Transparent, and as a supportive co-host, I went to Google to make sure that I got that the title was right, and we're gonna bring it up.
Uh-huh.
And I'm on this book page, and it's like other books you might enjoy, and it's Tippett by Maggie Griffin. Do you know Kathy Griffin's mom, Maggie?
Uh-huh.
The fact that it's like Don Lemon and Maggie Griffin Tippett, it's just hilarious to me. And I wanted to point that out.
Okay. Okay.
Anyway, okay. So as we're kind of talking about the things that we appreciate about Don Lemon, is like, I have to have respect for a Black queer man coming out on television in the way that he did when no one else was really doing that. And like, that took something really important to be able to do. And so when I worked with Don, it was before he had come out, and before his book was out. And I think like it was known, but like not really talked about in public or something like that. Mm-hmm. I can't really remember. But he's also moved up the ranks over the years in CNN in a way that takes something, right? Like, and like, just in fairness, like I was not like a viewer of Don's show. It wasn't really my style of show, but like, I appreciate that he was there every night. He had a team, he had a voice, and like a lot of people listened to his voice every single night. And so I had a lot of respect for that, but like, we're going to get into the anti in a few minutes.
And we will.
But like, I really appreciated kind of the stature that he was able to build for himself at CNN until a time. I also feel like something that you can't take away from Don is that like his voice has been a part of the storytelling of the last decade, right? When you watch documentaries about things that have happened in really the last probably 15 years, you're going to hear Don's voice. You're going to hear his reporting. You're going to hear, the way that he told the story. Don Lemon is a part of what this zeitgeist is, because of the work that he did. So that's kind of one of the things that I feel like I appreciate about Don as we look in the fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be quite honest, I think that's where my fan starts and stops. Is about the role, right? Don't laugh at me. About
I'm nothing.
What about the place that he has in society, in the journalism ecosystem specifically, right? As a Black queer person, I think you're absolutely right that like, there's part of that ascent and that journey that, has to be recognized as fruitful and positive, and wonderful to witness, especially once he came out, right? Because we know the glass ceilings, right, and other invisible restrictions and constrictions that queer people, especially if you're also Black, have to navigate, especially if you're doing it in public in some short sort of way, as he was on television, right? And so want to give, deference, respect, or whatever, it is to that kind of representational space, right, that he takes up. But that is I do believe that is where it starts and stops for me, because so much of the work you mentioned how in so many different ways you're going to hear about Don Lemon's thoughts on how he covered certain issues. When you watch documentaries and they do the little montage to like show you what was happening over a particular period, there's always going to be a Don Lemon clip, right? Absolutely. But I also thought that like many of those clips are not great, though, at least in the documentaries I'm watching, at least in the ones I'm watching. I mean, here's the thing, right? Don Lemon, as a visible Black gay man who had the platform that he had, was also, you know how we always talk about Bill Cosby and how Bill Cosby was going around here telling people to pull up their pants and was like really embracing respectability, right?
It sounds like we've already moved into the anti. Uh, Go ahead on, get in there.
Well, I'm using a very specific example, right? Bill Cosby was going around here telling people to pull up their pants and saying that, like, you know, we as black people, if we wanted respect, then we have to respect ourselves, right? That was Bill Cosby's thing.
Can I ask you to pause right there? Don, this is where you should probably stop watching.
Don Lemon also expressed similar thoughts, right, about how we as black people should be showing up in the world and moving through the world for the sake of white consumption and white appeal, right? Like, those are just the facts. You can go find the clips if you want, but I was there, okay? I remember witnessing it. I remember the social media discourse, right, about it, right? All of the think pieces that came out about it. And so it's interesting to juxtapose a lot of the work that at least we remember because of the ways in which it either felt like some sort of betrayal to many in black community, right? That you had this black man, this black gay man telling us as black people that we shouldn't say nigga, or automatically assuming and perpetuating a host of stereotypes while he's covering, right, something as tragic as what went down in Ferguson, right? And then also, for the most part, him not seemingly being open to the feedback that was being lodged his way from community, right? And so it's interesting to juxtapose his kind of representational place for all those things that we listed in the fan side of this conversation up against the actual work, or at least the bits and pieces of the work that seemingly most resonate and stick with the culture. That's something that's tough for me to I shouldn't say tough, but like reconciling that is interesting, to say the least.
When you said, you know how Bill Cosby, I was like, oh, here we go. Okay.
Listen.
Get in.
Listen.
Friend, you did that.
You know, she showed
really
up,
did.
okay?
She's
showed
in her
up.
bag today, and I appreciate it. Oh, God. I was like, oh, girl, go off. Go all the way in. What I think is actually really important here is, like, Don Lemon, I think, represents a moderate part of the community, right? That doesn't think we should be saying nigga.
Which community?
Of black community.
Oh, the
right?
black community.
Of black folks,
okay.
right? Like, there are
just
a lot of people
to verify.
who would, yeah.
To verify.
To be fair. And like, oh, blackest of Jesuses, blackest of Jesuses. Okay.
Call her.
But there are a lot of people who see the world the way that Don does, right? And like that more progressive folks are like not really fucking with anymore, or are pushing back up against him, being like, yeah, I don't fuck with you on that. Or actually, you don't need to be telling me how I should speak, or you need to be thinking about how you talk about this community, or you need to be thinking about how you address women and those different kinds of things, right? I think we have aunties and uncles and grandparents, or even people who are our age that see the world in that way. And I think that it's kind of interesting in black community, we really police the lines of blackness and how we see things, and kind of push people away when they don't agree with certain parts of community. And like, Don squarely falls within that space, right, where he's had pushback because he wasn't progressive enough for people. And I think it was a lot of fair pushback.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's also important to note. Well, side note, while you were speaking, you mentioned that, you know, he was kind of moderate or whatever. Did you know, I was doing my research for this episode, did you know that he was a Republican back in the day? And what?
I did not know that, but
this is public information. When he was in school, apparently he was a Republican. He voted for Reagan. And then I believe it was in 2018, you know, he, you know, made this whole big deal on his show about being an independent, like a registered, you know, independent, as a means of, I guess, delineating, right, that moderateness, moderality,
Wow.
The fact of him being, moderate in his positioning. But I wanted to note that it's also kind of, I think a lot about our growing success as individuals and how it's hard to be quote unquote successful in this world with these systems that we are under and not in big ways and small ways capitulate to whiteness and what is ultimately white supremacy. And I wonder if said moderateness and like middle of the line approach to, understanding and seeing issues also contributed to all of that representational success, right? That we mentioned, because he was able to, affect some sort of affinity with, more conservative people across racial and ethnic identities, as well as perhaps some of the more progressive folks. Because right in the last few years, Don Lemon got black, as the community like to say, right? Like post Ferguson, post that, you know what it is. Like he literally, right? Like the week before, either the week of or the week before he was fired, right? He literally was going back and forth with this, conservative person who was, trying to twist the history, right, as it relates to black folks and guns in this country, right? And so Don Lemon was, literally took the entire segment. It was an issue for his co-host to like push back on that, right? So he's blackified over the last few years in particular. And that's been interesting to witness as well, right? Just the overall shifts in how he goes about articulating his various feelings about particular things.
I think often about the ways that we police the boundaries of blackness, and like one of those ways is in politics, and how and like where we stand on politics, right? And while I think about, I come from a really liberal progressive lens, right? And I get that. And I also think that when we are looking at people who don't see the world in the same way, we question their blackness, or we measure their blackness. Because I mean, I've been doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, Don done got real black. Like he didn't really lean in, right? But I also don't think that that measure is fair to people, right? In the same ways that like we do that because of their partners and their ethnicities, and we do that because of the way that they speak or dress or whatever, what have you. But I think that like we've seen, especially in the Trump years, I think we've seen even more conservative black folks really get a lot stronger about how they feel about their blackness, about their politics, about the way they view the world, about the way they see this country. And I can tell you just from the people that I know that are in that Don Lemon kind of age group and demographic of lens, I've seen those people get a lot more radicalized than I've ever seen before, in similar ways to like we've seen on the other side as well, right? Because I know for myself, like when I was younger, like I wasn't thinking about politics. I remember being in high school and thinking George Bush was on some bullshit, right? But like I wasn't thinking about race in the same way that I was until I moved to Atlanta and went to Clark and was like able to like be immersed in blackness. The Bay Area is like really diverse, and I wasn't thinking about race in the same way until I got older. And so when I see Don nowadays, I'm thinking like, it's not about age. I think it's about the time we're in and like the things that we've been through. Because like Don was saying things 10 years ago that right now we would be like, I know you fucking lying, because we were, the more progressive people were saying it back then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm challenged there because like, I see like we can kind of track his progress here, but it's also like, I can't agree with him on everything, right? Or there's a lot of times when Don has come out and said things when I've been like, why the fuck would you say that, right? But also as a black journalist and as a leader amongst black journalists, when he got fired, I sent him a message because he said like, I don't know, the way he presented it initially, I was like, if you need support from black journalists or from this association, like, let me know, right? I haven't heard from him, but like we also have to like be supportive in those moments as well. It's a weird dichotomy to be in.
Well, I did not reach out to him. Uh,
She said, "Fuck it." No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
No, but also, right, the particulars around his firing there are questions. Okay.
100%.
Again, like I said, check out, for everyone listening, check out that Variety story. Really interesting. And then, also, right, like, I have heard stories about Don Lemon, right, that match up with what is in that Variety story. I don't have any personal experience with any of that or him. I do think I want to go back really quickly to the point that you were talking about the how we as Black folks sometimes police other people's Blackness. And I just want to complicate that a little more by saying, at least when I'm speaking, I never want to question you black, you black. If you black, you black, right? Not questioning that. But I think it might be more appropriate to say that, the at least intention behind what is perceived as a policing of Blackness is really about figuring out, one's anti-Blackness. Because you can be Black. We are all Black, right? But we all have varying levels of anti-Blackness, right? That we need to continually tease out to ensure that we don't become machinations of white supremacy.
Come on.
Right? That we don't become the Black face of a white institution that still wants to see people who look like us, right, at the lowest levels of, the ladder, right?
Preach.
Of whatever ladder you want to talk, right? And Don Lemon has exhibited anti-Black behavior time and time again.
Help her, Holy Ghost.
Right? And I think it's safe to say over the last few years, in part because of as you mentioned, the world that we are in right now, right? And however it might have personally or professionally impacted Don Lemon, we've seen him articulate things that would seem to be incongruent with stuff that he has articulated before. Right. And it's interesting about providing grace and space for people to grow and change, right, and learn and develop. And we should always do that. But I believe it was the Game of Thrones people who said never forget, or the North remembers, or something like that. And so that's me. I've never watched Game of Thrones. I just watched one episode, the one with the red wedding, and I said never again. But I believe that's something that they say.
I just thought it was interesting that, like, you attach never forget to Game of Thrones.
Because I feel like that's something that they say. You gotta be, you gotta have a variety of references because, Black people are not a monolith. A lot of Black people watch Game of Thrones, and I bet you they appreciate that reference, especially coming from me.
Well, no, it wasn't because Game of Thrones is a white reference. I always think of never forget as 9/11, and so Game of Thrones was like, I didn't even know that was the thing. We're way off topic.
Okay.
No. Oh, I know. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I kind of threw that in there for yeah.
Oh my God! Today. Anyway,
sorry. Anyway, I do. There is. I think there's a lot of validity of what you're saying. I think that, like, Black folks' anti-Blackness has been receding, right? Like, I think we've seen like Black folks starting to recognize their own anti-Blackness and starting to be like, oh, I'm participating in that, or oh, I'm a part of that, or oh, I've been perpetuating that at work, or oh, I've been doing that in my neighborhood, or I've been thinking about things differently. And I think that we see that quite often in people's, like, progress and the ways that they talk about how they see their political view.
I also think that that the grace that I want to extend towards Don as a public figure is also one that has developed over the last few years in particular, right? As we have become more visible folks, it is not easy being on the camera, on a microphone, and having to articulate something, right? To whether that's interviewing, whether that's, I don't know if Don had a Jerry's thoughts at the end of every episode or something like that. But so many of the folks with those types of shows had, like, the monologue section at the end or whatever. But there is a lot of pressure there. And learning in public, baby, is difficult. It is hard. Hard with an O, y'all. Okay? And so I want to, extend and recognize the difficulty in that space as well. I will also note, and this is unfair of me, but I'm gonna say it anyway.
Oh God.
It is important for me as a Black, queer, and trans journalist to stay connected to the Black, queer, and trans journalist community as my star gets bigger, praise the Lord. And I am interested in how Don Lemon for himself thinks about his relationship to Black queer journalism community and Black queer community more broadly.
Amen.
Right? We haven't mentioned his white husband yet, and I'm only mentioning it, right, because every single time one of those threads get going, when folks want to talk about, the Black men and their white men partners, he's always on, often and always on, that list. And I think it's important for us as Black queer people to talk about the ways that other Black queer people, especially those who have some sort of platform of visibility, how they are or are not, right? Because it is their choice and they can do whatever the hell they want, showing up for other folks of similar identities. And it is unfortunate because we know that for so many Black people, when they get to a certain level, it often feels as if their connection to community, dissipates and it wanes. And I think that's an important conversation.
I feel like Don's gonna end up being on the show.
What show?
On Don Lemon tonight. Bitch, what show do you think I'm talking about? I feel like Don's gonna end up being on this show.
Well, you best friends with him. He your mentor. He sat you beside him while he was doing
hold on.
The broadcast.
You see how the lamestream media will take will develop a narrative.
Oh God.
I wanted to say a couple of quick things here. Number one, I think FANTI learning in public is an episode. Period. I think we should do that.
Okay.
And maybe Sherry Shepherd is the guest for that.
Oh my God, today.
I think that's a fun conversation. I'm pitching that, John Murray. I'm pitching that to you.
John's like, that's not my job. What you talk about?
John is like, what? I'm not a publicist. Call me. Okay, but I also, you talked about the queerness piece of this, and I'd written this down and wasn't sure if I'd be able to use it, but I did want to note that in the Variety article, the headline is very queer coded. They say that in the headline of the Variety article that we have available in the episode notes. It says, Don Lemon's misogyny at CNN exposed, a malicious text mocking female coworkers and, quote, diva-like behavior. And I'm like, diva-like behavior is not some language that I hear them using for straight men, right? Like, it's like,
okay,
that is some shit that you say about a queer person, right? And like, is it like super offensive and harmful and all this other shit? I don't know. But like, when I read it, I was like, we have heard all kinds of stories about, Chris Cuomo, Tucker Carlson, and even straight Black men like Charles Barkley and Shannon Sharp and Steve Harvey, who've all really been kind of talked about for their eccentric personalities and their demanding nature of like of their teams. We've seen that letter that came out from Steve Harvey that was really controversial about how he didn't want people coming to his dressing room and things like that. I didn't hear people calling him a diva. They may have, but I don't remember that. Right? But seeing diva-like behavior with Don, I was like, that feels like something. And to be fair, it was a quote. It wasn't an editor, but like it was in the headline.
Yeah, and you know what? You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I see that, but also, if he's being a diva, he's being a diva.
Listen, be a diva, sis. I'm just saying. I just want to point it out.
It is, yes, both coded language and could also be very, very, very true. But people call me a diva. People call me a diva. And guess what? Guess what, Jarrett?
I'm not guessing. I refuse. We want to hear from y'all. Let us know what you think about this conversation. Hit Hit us up on social media using the hashtag FANTIfam. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and the TikTok machine at FANTI Podcast. Coming up, why y'all hate us so much, and our listener feedback and our honorable mentions, dishonorable mentions. I almost got all the way through that without stumbling. We'll be right back.
Video games can make you laugh.
They can make you cry.
They can even make you sing.
We're the hosts of Triple Click.
It's a podcast about video games.
This is an exciting time for new games, from Diablo to Final Fantasy.
From Starfield to Street Fighter.
From Zelda to, oh, who are we kidding? We're just going to talk about Zelda.
Whether you play games or you just like hearing about them, we've got you covered.
Find us at MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Bye.
Welcome back to FANTI. Apparently, I already done fucked up the show because I was supposed to pull an email and Tre'vell's having to do it now, and I'm a terrible person. What you got for us, Tre'vell?
Well, I wouldn't say terrible.
Oh.
That might be, a little much,
Okay.
Okay, we have an email here from Nicole. The title of her email is Hustle Culture and Happiness. My name is Nicole. I'm a longtime fan and listener of the pod and felt compelled to email you about my experience with hustle culture and the idea of happiness. Okay, so this is in response to you had asked a question a couple episodes ago about happiness. Right. And whether, we feel like we can be happy. Not sure if this is relevant, Nicole says, but I am a white woman. LOL, cringe. I live in New York and have dreams of acting full time. Sigh. Couldn't I have picked a more lucrative, realistic goal to be passionate about? Anyway, because of this, I have mainly worked in restaurants over the past 10 years as it offers flexibility and quick cash. However, your girl is also an alcoholic. Oop.
Oh.
The oop is hers, not mine, by the way.
She wrote that.
She did write it.
But that's how it hit me. So I was like, when you said it, I wasn't ready. Okay. Go ahead.
Nicole says, I have been sober for over 3 months now. Oh, congratulations.
Nice.
And I'm trying to break out of the industry as it has encouraged and fueled my drinking over the years. I just started a job as part-time administrative assistant at a university. I work there 4 days a week, but this income alone would not be sufficient for me. Therefore, I'm keeping my weekend restaurant job. I'm now working 7 days a week and am already experiencing feelings of intense anxiety and sometimes depression. I'm fortunate enough to have an amazing therapist who guides me through all of this, but it's still very challenging. I find myself falling into the idea that working 7 days a week is admirable. And I find solace in the fact that I am hustling/grinding and working for my money, while others who may be more privileged than me are not working as hard. Even though this mentality helps me get through the week, I also realize that it is just another way for capitalism/white supremacy to seep through the cracks. To prolong the amount of time I have before I feel burnout, I employ the mentality that hustle culture is a positive thing when deep down I know it is not. I have noticed that the more I work, the less time I allow myself to have guilt-free relaxation. During my quote-unquote downtime, I am scrolling through audition postings and or working on my resume rather than watching TV or reading a book in the few hours of time I have to actually relax. I am not happy. Even when I book a role and feel I am one step closer to getting representation by an agency or what have you, I find that I am already thinking about how I will support myself for the next project. It is a fucking mess. Just wanted to share. Hustle culture sucks. Capitalism sucks. All of this fucking sucks, and I am unhappy. Love you both, Nicole.
So first things first, I want to congratulate you on 3 months of sobriety. I know that is challenging, and congrats on that. So secondly, I want to point out a show called How to Get Rich on Netflix. It's a new show with Ramit Sethi, and it's really, really fantastic. And it talks about money. I've talked here before about like having challenges with like how I think about money and wanting to think differently about it. And so I hear you talking about like the hustle culture of this, and like in the episode, one of the episodes, he talks about this idea that like, oh, if I work harder and I work more and I work harder and I work more, I'll be rich, or it'll achieve XYZ for me. And like, that can be true for certain things, but it does not always mean we're going to make more money. Right. And like, I can tell you as a person who does a lot of volunteer work, a lot of development work, a lot of things that are like independent work, like I don't make as much money as I could be making somewhere else. Right. But I work my ass off. And so it is not this idea that like, oh, you need to be working harder. This idea of no days off is some bullshit to me. Like, I have never bought into that. I think it is all capitalism and all the idea that you're supposed to be just killing yourself for the sake of work. And like, I just do not believe in that. And so but I struggle with it myself, because even last night I was up until midnight writing when I was supposed to be done at 7, but like I had this something coming through and I was writing it and I was like, well, you know, you gotta work late nights and do it. And I'm arguing with myself about whether or not I should stop because I've been writing all day. And like, I have that programming as recently as last night. And so it's something that I'm always resisting against myself and trying to like interrogate.
I think for me, it has been a very busy time period in my life. Praise the Lord. I've said this before, but like having these conversations is always tough for me because I don't like, I work a lot. I work too much, actually, but my motivation is not money. Right. My motivation is something very different, right? Something beyond myself. And so for me, that is the difficult thing to reconcile and square. Right. Like I do all the stuff that I do because I'm trying to, create space and make people feel more safe in the spaces that we are in and, document the history for the people to come and, all that extra shit. And, I this past weekend, some of you who follow me, that I was supposed to do Good Morning America this past weekend. And 20 minutes after I posted about it, they, told us about a quote unquote scheduling conflict. And so we ended up pre-taping it. It'll run this coming Saturday. But I did that pre-tape interview that morning, went straight from Good Morning America to the airport, flew back, got in the car, came home, changed immediately to go to Michael Chin's birthday party. Shout out to Michael Chin, one of our OG guests. And then woke up the next morning, right, to do What a Day. And also had 2 interviews for We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film. And We See Each Other, the podcast, available everywhere.
Hey.
And then just, jumped right on into this work week, right? And I do think that we all have to think differently about what breaks look like, what this hustle culture looks like. But again, for me, it's always interesting because I'm like, I'm not hustling to fit into hustle culture. I'm not hustling because it feels like I have to. I'm hustling because of the broader, goal and broader calling or purpose. And like, that's difficult for me to reconcile. But I am happy most days. So, do with that what you will. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your letter. And now it is time for our dishonorable mentions. These are the stories of people that caught our attention this week that deserve a call out either for their good or their foolishness. Jarrett, again, you have 12 million. Would you like to get us started?
I just have a couple. I want to give a shout out. And
he always be like, I got a couple, and then there'd be 5 listed here.
Well, I mean, some weeks it's 1, so you'll take what you can get.
True.
I want to give a shout out to the Pulitzer Prize winning Erica Diane Smith.
Not her middle name now.
She's Erica D. Smith, I should say. She has a job here at some paper in Los Angeles, but she is an advocacy committee member at the National Association of Black Journalists here in Los Angeles, and we are so proud of her. According to the piece at the Los Angeles Times, more than a dozen times journalists shared bylines or credits on stories submitted to the Pulitzer judges. They included City Hall regulars David Zonizer, Dakota Smith, Julia Wick, Benjamin Oreskes, I hope I said your name correctly, along with Gustavo Ariana, Erica Diane Smith, Jessica Garrison, Ruben Vives, Marissa Gerber, Angel Jennings, who's another friend of our organization, Emily Alpert Reyes, Melanie Mason, and Libor Janney. Hope I said your name correctly as well. Congratulations to all of you on your Pulitzer win for the coverage of the City Hall situation that we heard about, the racist language that came out of there. Their managing editor was Steve Cloud, but I also want to give a shout out to Kevin Merida, who is the executive editor over at the Los Angeles Times. Congratulations on this big moment for all of you. Really, really proud of you. So congratulations. I want to give a shout out to a show that I've probably talked about here before. I love couples therapy on Showtime, and it is back with what should be a season 4, but it's still some reason season 3. But the episodes are all out on Showtime right now. I breezed through the show. I saw Beyonce Bianca talking about it on Twitter the other day. If you're a person who's into therapy or like into the love and dating relationship kinds of shows, it is such a good show. I'm so into it. So check out Couples Therapy on Showtime. While we're talking about premium cable, over on HBO Max, A Black Lady Sketch Show is so good. And if you're not watching it, you are missing out. This season is their final season, and this class is Robin Thede, Gabrielle Dennis, Sky Townsend, and they have 3 featured artists who are Demaya Gurley, Tamara Jade, and Angel Lakita Moore. And they are so funny. Like, you might remember that Quinta Brunson was on season 1 of this show. She left the show to go create Abbott Elementary. Ashley Nicole Black, who you'll know from various different things. She's in films, and I remember her from being back on Sam B over on TBS. It's executive produced by Issa Rae, and they've had all kinds of really great guest stars and really, really great moments on the show that are just really, really funny. So go check out A Black Lady Sketch Show on HBO Max, which is about to become Max or whatever it is now. I also want to give a shout out to FANTI, and Professor Dr. Charles Davis.
I told y'all he had a lot.
Listen, I have some thanks to say. Dr. Charles Davis has a new podcast called Police Free Campus. I believe it's also, you can type in hashtag Police Free Campus. It engages in organizers, practitioners, and scholars in discussing the challenges and possibilities for colleges and universities without the police. Shout out to Dr. Davis. He's been on our show here multiple times. He's going to be a part of the conversations that we have coming out in Historically Black Phrases. Love him. He's a fantastic man, and I want y'all to go check out his podcast. Lastly, I just want to shout out something.
And he fine, in case you were wondering.
He is not an unattractive person, but that is not what I'm talking about. Lastly, I want to give a shout out.
We could talk about it both.
To something that I just rediscovered yesterday that really touched my spirit. I was planning to have something delivered to you during the taping of the show today, but it didn't work out with the timing. But that Wendy's Baconator breakfast combo, baby, my God today. If you have not had a breakfast Baconator, let me tell you, they are doing God's work over at the Wendy's in the morning.
Oh my God.
Let me tell you, baby, it is so good. If I remember, I'll have one sent to you next week, and it's so good. But that's all.
Love that for you. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, I have been, an authoress for a week now, and the promo and whatnot has been an interesting journey. So I want to first give out an honorable mention to the members of the FANTIfam who showed up to my New York book event last week. Shout out to you all. And, the others of you who also listen to What a Day. A lot of the What a Day squad, the WAD squad were present as well. Shout out to you all. It was a wonderful time and experience. Also, shout out to Fatima Jamal, who moderated that conversation for me. But I want to give a dishonorable mention to the grandmama who called in, side note, not even side note, context. So I had this little, they call it an integrated media tour, where they have me in a studio and they basically patch me in to these different, entities, whether it's like a local news spot or a talk radio show or whatever. And I just, I cycle through them mofos from, 8 a.m. to noon, right? 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 40 minutes here, And I was doing an interview with this black talk show radio talk show in Chicago. Okay. And now we were supposed to do 2 segments. We did our 2 segments, and they were like, "Do you have time for one more?" And I said, "Yeah, I got time for one more." Because it was supposed to be my last interview, right?
No.
And we didn't have an episode of FANTI to record because we did a drop of We See Each Other, the podcast, in the feed. Hope y'all like that. And so I was like, yeah, I got time for, one more segment. Now, little did I know, in the next segment, they wanted to open up the phone lines. And so they opened up the phone lines, and somebody's grandmama.
Oh, no. Oh, help us, Holy Ghost. No. No.
Somebody's grandmama. Oh, more context. Right before the break, we had talked about the sports bans and the bathroom bans and the legislation that we as trans people are battling right now. And so somebody's Meemaw got on the phone to tell me that her Bible, all the stuff about what her Bible say, and da 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 da, but how we need to let kids be kids. She don't care what we do when we are adults, but we need to let kids be kids. And mind you, so wasn't prepared for Gen Pop to be asking questions, because when Gen Pop is asking questions, right? They don't have the filter perhaps that folks who are used to being in front of a microphone, might have. And so they say things in the way that your Meemaw would say things, right? Let's just say I was taken out of my doing promo for the book energy. And I told this woman, I said, you know what? Sometimes we need to put down our Bibles and pick up other educational materials.
Oh, no.
And I said, additionally, we always say we want to let kids be kids, but the kids are telling us that they are trans. The kids are articulating their truths to us, and we are not allowing them and supporting them and affirming them. And I said, listen, ma'am, I knew that I was different, quote unquote, because I didn't have the language, but I knew that I was different since 4 years old.
Say it.
Now, as I stand before you, I am a wonderful, fabulous, amazing, wonderful being. Okay, I couldn't curse, because normally I would say I'm a non-binary bad bitch, but I couldn't curse because it was radio, right? Like regular radio, not like, Sirius XM. Anyway, and I'm gonna wrap this up shortly, I promise. I tell her that, sometimes we need to put down our Bibles and pick up other educational materials. And then I tell her, I was like, when I was 4 years old, I knew that I was different than how everyone around me wanted me to show up in the world. And though I sit before you as this wonderful, well-adjusted, fabulous person, imagine who I could have been if what I knew to be true when I was 4 years old was affirmed and supported, right? And not policed, right? And attempted to be prayed away and, all of these other things, right? And then I also said, the reason why you need to put down the Bible and pick up some other educational materials, because you don't even know that you are parroting Republican and conservative talking points as your own. You don't know what you are speaking of. And it would be helpful for us all if we would do the necessary education that we should all do. And so my dishonorable mention goes to that Meemaw. And it also goes to her grandchild, because I know she got a grandchild, okay, who's queer. I always find, right, that the people who are most vocal about what they feel we should be doing with the LGBTQ, et cetera. You got somebody in your family that you hate, that you despise, that you
come on.
You see how they swish or sweet themselves all up through the aisle at the church house, right? You see how they, walk into the baby. Listen, I got two of them right in my living room, and so it reminded me. I'll put it this way: it reminded me of how much education still needs to happen and how much ignorance, right, in various communities that conservatives are exploiting for the purpose of their anti-trans campaigns. And we should all think more deeply about that. Side note, check out the Anti-Trans Hate Machine. It's a fabulous podcast by journalist Amara Jones that details with explicit clarity, right, the campaign, right, that is anti-trans hate. That's all I got for you all today. Now it's time for Black History is Happening Every Day.
Paula Williams Madison is an American journalist and writer of Africa and Hakka descent. She's a former NBC Universal executive until she retired in 2011 from NBC after more than 35 years in news media. And Madison is now the CEO of a family investment group based in Chicago called Madison Media Management. She's been recognized for corporate leadership and community outreach. She was named one of the 75 most powerful African Americans in corporate America by Black Enterprise magazine in 2005. And she was included in Ebony magazine's Power 100 in 2014. She was named one of the outstanding 50 Asian Americans in business as well. And she continues to carry on her legacy of community outreach in both Black and Asian communities, as well as becoming the chair and CEO of the Los Angeles Sparks, a member of the WNBA Board of Governors, along with many other high positions at other organizations. I'll also say, like, Paula is one of the people that we call on when we need advice or perspective or wisdom or just a little bit of another lens here in Los Angeles. And I'm incredibly grateful for Paula and all of the ways that she has, been in service to us. So thank you. Shout out to Paula Madison, who's making Black history happen every single day.
I would just note really quickly, 1 second. I would just note, in case people were like, what the hell is Haka? And then you also heard 50 Asian Americans in business. Haka is a, sect of Chinese folks. Okay. So I just felt like that was important education.
Noted. Appreciate that. Want to let y'all know that my new interview with Shonda Rhimes is available right now, just out on NPR and Bullseye. We talk about her career and her new series, Queen Charlotte. We talk about why she's just now starting to feel successful, how her life has been a lot different since moving over to Netflix. It's a really great conversation, so you can go check that out. Also, Tre'vell's book, We See Each Other, and podcast, We See Each Other, the podcast, are both available right now. The book is available wherever you get your books, wherever you get fine books, and wherever you get your podcast. You can tune into both.
And bad books, you can get my book wherever you happen to be slumming it, okay?
She said, I'm at the gutter bookstore, okay?
Listen, I'm everywhere, okay? I'm worldwide, like Candy say. I'm worldwide.
I'm a worldwide woman. WWW. You know the Beyonce? You don't know Worldwide Woman?
Oh, that's a deep cut. Oh, I haven't heard that in so long.
Oh, you're welcome.
Anyway. Yes, and so We See Each Other, the podcast. It comes out every Tuesday. We did the feed drop last week, so you got a little tease. What you heard last week was episode 2, right? So you can go back and hear episode 1 if you want. And episode 3 is out right now, and it features a wonderful interview with actress Trace Lysette, who stars in the movie that you can go see right now in theaters called Monica. Take a quick listen. When the film premiered at Venice, I believe it was an 11-minute standing ovation that you and the film received. How did it feel to be in that moment?
I mean, I went to the bathroom directly after, and I sat on the toilet and I boo-hooed because I didn't really understand what this moment meant. What does 11 and a half minutes of people clapping in your face in a foreign country mean? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. And I sat there with that and thought about me and my journey with my own family, my journey as a working girl in the village in the early 2000s, as a non-binary person in the 90s. What is all this led up to this, and what does this mean?
All right. Make sure to go check out the new episodes of We See Each Other, the podcast, every Tuesday. Subscribe. Make sure that you are tuned in, and we've got more episodes coming for you each week. So, anything else? You all good? You ready to go?
No, let's go home. I got other stuff to do. Hustle culture.
Okay. Listen, okay, we got a full day of shit to do. We appreciate y'all. If this is your first time watching us on YouTube, we have 3 seasons of shows back on our podcast. So make sure to go check us out wherever you get your Slay-worthy audio, or apparently the shitty audio probably too. Listen. If you have a comment or a suggestion about this week's show, we're at FANTI Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and the TikTok. Use hashtag FANTIfam, or you can shoot us an email to fanti@maximumfun.org.
And as always, if you like what you hear, help us make it. Give us some dollars, $5, $10, whatever you can afford every month. You can do that by becoming a member of Maximum Fun family at MaximumFun.org/join. Our music, as always, is brought to you by the one and only Grammy Award-winning Corece, COR.ECE. Can I just say, now that Beyonce is on tour, we are just bringing back Cozy in a wonderful way, and I love that for Corece. Our graphics are by Ashley Wynn and the folks over at Moon House Creative. Our editor is Anne Marie Huber, and our producer is Palmira Muniz.
Our senior producer. Oh, I think you were supposed to like sing it a little bit more. Remember, we're growing that.
Our producer is Hamida Muniz.
I'm working on my part.
What is that? Didn't we tell you about Blue's Clues last time?
I didn't say. What do you? Our senior producer is Laura Swisher. This is a production of Maximum Fun.